Yes, yes. Hello. Okay.
Wow. Oh,
You get to keep up. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
yeah. There's children.
Oh, what's up?
Okay.
Yeah. No. Where's the green frog? Sorry? Where's the green frog? That's from NFKM. That's the Natural Science Social Club. And they helped organize a little bit with the food and stuff. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I think almost everyone's inside. Okay. You guys from the team, do you guys want to come up? Say hi. The team, please. The dream team. Okay. Hi everyone. And your attention, please. Guess we'll start now. So first of all, welcome to all of you, your students, faculty, speakers. We're really happy to have you guys. So we're gonna start by introducing ourselves. So we're kind of your hosts for today and also the part of the organizing team. I'm Nicolo.
My name is Josh. Ethan.
I'm Vincent.
Yeah, and so we're students here, like master students, and we're parts also of the Student Council of Environmental Science, even though this came out later. So first of all, a little bit of context about what this is. So at the start of the autumn semester, we heard about this Civis call for funding. And so we came up together with this idea for a project. And so this is what is going on today. And so we received actually like surprisingly overwhelming support from the student council first, and then our professors, and then also the social clubs like NF, which maybe you know about. And also, so I mentioned Civis, but we also receive funding through SUS, which you know. So hopefully you feel that your membership money is going to well used and that the food was good. And also, so I mentioned Civis, which is a European University Alliance, and they do many different things, and they try to promote basically like different of these universities working together and different students working together. And so that's why they help us fund this event, which so now is happening here in Stockholm, but also like a week ago, there was one in Brussels, which was also about the just transition, and there will be one in Marseille in France in a few weeks. Okay. So now I want to talk about the just transition, which you've seen is kind of like the overarching theme today. And so you might know there are many problems right now with our planets that you've heard about. There's pollution, biodiversity loss, and climate change. And some call these with the ominous name of triple planetary crisis, which is not very fun. And so we're all starting to feel these effects. But they are most suffered actually by those that are marginalized and less favored in society. And this is because environmental degradation isn't the only problem we face, but also social inequality, bigotry, and more recently, the rise of authoritarianism, and you know what I'm talking about. So ecology and sustainability isn't the only important thing here, and we need to solve these problems with justice, equity, and solidarity in mind. And this is where the words just transition come in. And this is something that has been around for some years, since the 80s actually, and it has many definitions, but generally it describes the equitable treatment of people in the move to environmental sustainability and a post-carbon society. So the problem is this issue can be solved by only one field or academia alone, and we actually need to work with many different actors. So we need unprecedented collaboration among many people, and we want to learn more about many things. And more importantly, find ways that we ourselves, as students, the future, can help. And so this is why we invited many people today to talk about how they're contributing to a just and sustainable society, and how we can too. So you've seen the schedule before maybe, but so we just had our lunch and bingo, hopefully. Then we'll have these talks to try to help us through these ideas of a just and sustainable transition, which Per will start with. And so they'll try to explain to us some of these problems, and you'll have the chance to ask them about it. So please do. In between, there will also be FICA and also poster session, because some PhD students, actually not so many, unfortunately, but they want to tell you about their own research, and so please go and ask them about it. And so after the talks are over, we'll have a panel discussion. And the plan is to further deepen our understanding of these many problems and see what a discussion between different actors can look like. And you'll again have the chance to ask questions, and we want this to be interactive. And so the problem is that these questions might actually make you uncomfortable and worry about the future. But we found that actually the best remedy is getting involved yourself. So our plan is really to try to help each other find how we can do something about it. So throughout our days, to plan on providing us with these tools. Recently, during a conference at SU, Greta Thunberg shared a quote by Palestinian activist Nadim Aslam, which goes, "Despair has to be earned. I personally have not done all I can to change things. I haven't yet earned the right to despair. So please don't give in to despair. Start small and let's collaborate to reach a just sustainable transition." So that said, we will end with dinner, and there's an invite to the Green Villas nightclub. So please go and you can enjoy your rest of the night. But please on Monday think about how we can make a change. Thank you.
Maybe just two things
Yes.
about organization stuff. We only have approximately one glass per person and one cup per person. So please reuse them throughout the day, and also at the end of the day, since we borrowed them from NF, bring them back into the room where you grabbed the lunch, that we can all bring them back and they don't get lost somewhere in this building. And if you during the conference have any questions about anything, you can always approach us. You find us with the name tags.
Especially when you feel uncomfortable with photos, like we don't want anyone to feel uncomfortable during this day. So if you don't want to be depicted on any, just tell us. It's totally okay.
Yeah. Also, actually, we will be recording part of the presentations. It's more for internal use, and so maybe we can keep a record. If you have a problem with this, please let us know, and we'll find a way to arrange it. But it will be to the speakers, not the audience in general. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
and
thank you.
the last thing, emergency exits there. Perfect. Have fun.
Great.
Thank you. Thanks. Looking forward to starting this. It's really good. Thank you for inviting me, and it's really wonderful to be here talking to you about this super important topic. So good job of framing it and inviting us, and thanks for the lunch and everything. So I'm going to talk about transformations to sustainability. I'm going to do a quick overview of about 25 years of research on transformations. That's my own my own career. I've been focusing on transformations, and I started over here at the systems ecology in 1995, and with my master's thesis. So, and then now I'm the deputy science director at the Stockholm Resilience Center, which is a center within the Stockholm University. So I'm going to talk about this topic, transformations, but also focusing in on something that I think we really need to address right now is the resistance and backlash that Nicola also talked about. So, but first I would just want to sort of give you an overview of the concept as it has developed over time. And I, as I said, I've been working quite a long time with this concept of transformation, but I never seen such an interest in the concept, also in combination with systems thinking. So there's of course the UN talks about it especially in the decade of action, which is not a decade anymore, and it's not a small ambition, 10 years to transform our world. The unions talks, the labor unions talks about just transition a lot, and have for quite a while. There is also transformation talk in certain sectors, like energy or food. Of course, the social movements, the youth movements, of course, talks about transformation, but also the business community, the private sector talks a lot about transformations too. And I think in many cases, it builds on an insight that the systems that we have created around food and energy, etc., even the global economic system doesn't deliver on things that we think are important, like justice and sustainability. So I think, and that's very promising, but I also think that we also need to talk more about this concept of transformation and also what we put in the word and what it means when it comes to agency and societal change, etc. So right now, when we open our social media or our phones or looking at the news, this is what meets us right at the moment. So at the same time, there is a huge, as I said, huge mobilization for transformations among a lot of actors in society, which is promising. There's also a counter movement, a sort of almost of the same magnitude as we're pushing these large scale transformations, and sometimes we're in the middle of them. There seems to be sort of a counter movement of the same amplitude, and it threatens to suffocate and close down any initial sort of transformation, but also derail the ongoing transformations. And one of the things I wanted to address then is that with this, you see that it's you hear about an increased polarization, you hear about violent conflict, you hear about democratic backsliding also right now, and that we frame this sometimes in the concepts of transition risk and transition pain. So I'm going to talk a bit more about these aspects of transition. But I also want to say that before I do that, we also think about transformations also in the context of being in the Anthropocene, as being humans as a dominate force on the planet, etc. We seem to have entered a couple of traps. We have sort of dead ends. We have lock-ins. It's really hard to get out of some systems, some societal structures they're very hard to get out of. And we, in this work, we question, do we even have the brain capacity to understand what's going on and to take action? Because it seems like a lot of the action that we take actually just perpetuate the systems that we try to change. So we talk a lot about that when it comes to the private sector and businesses, etc. Do they really? They talk a lot about action and transformation, but is it disruptive? So these are the questions that we ask. And just to show you too, there are lots of heuristics, a lot of theories out there that we use. And there's, I think that the IPBES, the IPBES report is coming out. It's the IPCC for biodiversity. It's coming out now. And they, I think, look into 62 different sort of theories and frameworks for understanding transformative change. But these are just two of them that we have been using a lot. One is from our resilience work, and the other one, and this one has been focusing on social ecological systems. But there is also the transition management, or the multi-level perspective model also, that look more at socio-technological systems. So, but what they sort of help us see a little bit different things, right, when it comes to transformation. So it helps us tune our glasses a bit differently. And this model looks at transformations as moving from one stability domain to another stability domain. So, and often then moving across certain tipping points. It might be really hard to push the system, which is this ball, to a different stability domain. And there's usually things happening. So the ball rolls back, and there's attractors and self-reinforcing feedbacks, etc., if you're familiar with the complexity theories. But sometimes they're also like these sort of points, tipping points is very popular to talk about, thresholds, etc., where suddenly things that wasn't possible before actually it becomes possible, and change can happen very rapidly. So that's one model that we use. The other one is the transition framework then, which is, I think, helpful to understand that transformations has an unmaking and a making dimension. So the making dimension is the green line. It's about innovation, it's about scaling, it's about disruptive impact, etc. Going from ideas to system impact. But it also look at the red line, which is the sort of what do we need to let go of, the unmaking of transformative change. What do we need to unlearn? What do we need to phase out? So I'm going to talk a bit more about that too. And as I said then, there's a lot of work that is really relevant to this time that we're in right now, addressing this transition risk and transition pain. And transition pain is really focusing a lot on the emotional dimension of transformative change. So I'll get back to that. But in our work, we have also looked at historical transformations. In this book, we looked at 8 different transformative processes, including this suffragette movements and reproductive justice and birth control in North America, for example, and other sort of large-scale transformations. And in all of them, we see that transformation always comes with some kind of resistance. And it's actually a good sign. It's a sign that you're actually doing something transformative. Because what you should be worried about is when you don't have any resistance, because then you might have adapted too much to the current status quo. So it's easy for the current regime and the status quo to say, like, yeah, we can accept this is cool. It fits with how we're thinking. So it is a good thing. But as we talk about it now, this resistance can turn into backlash, and backlash can derail the transformations that we need to achieve. And I think John Vasconcellos, he has talked about these 2 different dimensions of the green and the red line in a much more poetic way. He says that when it comes to capacities then to navigate transformations, we need to be both midwives to give birth to the new, but also hospice workers to let things die, but die with dignity. And I come back to this about the dignity. So if I focus in a bit then on the green line in that we call the X curve, the making dimensions, there's certain capacities that we need to navigate, sort of giving birth to the new. And there's a couple of things we need to address that has to do with just transition or justice. So often now we see we put a lot of hope to technologies, right? We think it's gonna, many people think that it's gonna save us. And there's these sort of, you know, investigations and reports that looks at, you know, can we say something about when these different technologies have a breakthrough, when that has to do with cost and critical mass, adopting them, you know? So they looked at, of course, when it comes to electricity and renewables, we might have already passed a tipping point. Well, when are the other technologies then, including the steel, etc., cement, chemicals? When do we reach the tipping point there? So it's I think you can criticize these from like, oh, how have you looked at this and what's your data, etc. But also, I think you can criticize them from a more systems perspective. And in a couple of years ago, we worked with the Swedish SIDA and 30 Swedish companies that is part of a Swedish Leadership for Sustainable Development. And they had done a lot of work figuring out where are our largest climate sort of footprint. And of course, then they discover, is it in a company or is it, you know, how we would sort of having a fleet of electric cars, etc. But of course, that is scope 1 and 2 that they often refer to. But actually, a lot of the impact is in scope 3, which is in the value chains. So then these companies then have identified a lot of the innovations that they want to invest in. So it's plant-based diets, it's solar panels, it's wind power, etc. It's a lot of these technologies that you're familiar with. So we looked at each of them, of these innovations that they suggest going to be like the savior and help us transform, and looked at what are the potential and unexpected, maybe sometimes, consequences, negative consequences. So when it comes to solar power and wind power, it can look like that. It looks sort of futuristic and also quite attractive. But the backside is, of course, where do these critical minerals come from that are needed for that sort of fossil-free economy? And often they're mined under horrible conditions in countries like the DRC. Plant-based diets can look like this, and it's part of a modern lifestyle and has a huge impact on our climate emissions, or carbon emissions. It can look like that, but it can also look like this, where there are studies showing that an increased plant-based diet consumption in the US put increased pressure on already water scarce agriculture systems in Mexico. And it's not like, you know, with bad intentions, all good intentions, but the way we are connected globally, it has these undesired and unexpected sometimes consequences. The same with circularity. It can look like this. I take my e-waste to the dump and I sort it, and I hope that it goes somewhere good. But a lot of it ends up in, for example, in Ghana, and so the metals are extracted under horrible conditions like these. And so the question is, how do we create frameworks and monitor these sort of potential changes around us as we go forward? So it's not saying like we shouldn't do it. It's not that. But our way of monitoring and keep track of things that are happening around us is flawed. So then, and it's also not just globally, like these effects we have a global impact of these actions. But actually in Sweden right now, we have this green transition going on when we sort of transform our energy system and to more renewable and fossil free. But in our work, we work a lot together with indigenous scholars, but also focusing on some of the indigenous issues around the world, in Amazon, North America, and also in northern Sweden, in Sápmi. And voices from there, they often point out the green transition is a black transition for us, because it's just going to continue to eradicate our life, way of life. And it's going to be part of a just continued colonization of our areas. And some of it is because the playing field is rigged. And people say like, oh, but it's good with friction. You know, if it's friction in society and a little bit conflict, it's actually positive, but not if the playing field is rigged and you can't meet in an equal way. So right now there is a lot of court cases that the Sami people have initiated, and every time there is a win for the Sami, it results in an outburst of racism, hate speech, and hate crime. And the hate crime often is in the form of killing the reindeer, because they know that if we kill the reindeer, we hurt the Sami. And just the way that the buffalo was used in eradicating a lot of the Native American people. So it's happening all the time. I was just in Åre and had a conference there, and was, as we were, you know, gathering up there, there was just a couple of wins for the Sami where they restricted some of the recreation areas, so you couldn't move anywhere. So you had to sort of keep on the path, and there was some limits to where you could go. Immediately resulted in this racism and in social media, and it's quite horrible actually when you think about it and you experience this. And it's also that we see that in Canada, where we work a lot, they're probably 20 to 30 years ahead of us when it comes to addressing indigenous issues. So the question is, how do you work in these situations with transformative change when you have a colonial legacy, and also these historical grievances and harm, and also intergenerational trauma? And that's not just in Sápmi that you have that. These are issues that we have to address as part of this emotional dimension of transformation. So if we look at the red line that I talked about in this X curve, you know, the phasing out and working with unlearning and letting go of things. We know that, for example, through our research by our colleagues in Gothenburg, like Martin Hultman, he looks at, for example, in the fossil fuel industry, there's a lot of men working, and these men often has to be sort of, their jobs have to be part of the phasing out, so they might lose their jobs. But that creates a lot of fear for losing income, a lot of grief for losing identity. And these feelings sometimes then, if unattended, turn into anger. Anger turns into hate. Hate turns into threats. And Martin and others have looked at where do these men, in this case, go with their unattended feelings when it comes to how they behave in on social media, and also how they vote. So we know that it fuels this sort of unattended feelings, fuels the polarization, and it's a soil for populism, and also that we know that also it's part of this, I think, very dangerous process of dehumanization. You dehumanize each other, demonizing the other, you know, that thinks differently from you, and that we know has started a lot of awful things historically when you start to dehumanize. So that's the one I think we should keep an eye on. And we know also that the resistance sometimes is in forms of, for example, the farmers protesting at certain times, especially when there's a new policy, for example, in the EU, it's going to be implemented. It's like maybe a month away. That's usually when people realize, okay, we're going to lose this. and we have to protest. So that's why you see some of these protests at a certain moment. And also the resistance and backlash also are, you can see it in the form of people being killed for their change-making work, challenging and changing systems. So this report, the Global Witness report, they list activists, change makers that have been killed for their work they're doing, and it's a tragically long list of people. You know that some of the resistance can be in we call them the incumbent, for example, big companies, large corporations, for example, that has the power, they're the incumbent in the system. And we know from work like Naomi Oreskes and Eric Conway that these large companies can sometimes team up with the scientists also and actually provide a huge hinder for transformative change. And then also as part of the transition risk is that it's very risky to start to destabilize systems like the oil industry, for example. So if you do that in a country with an authoritarian regime, it can create, of course, a national turmoil, but also those countries can start to act very differently to other countries, and sometimes it can result in war. So these are the issues that we need to, address as part of transformation. So transition risk and pain, then, which also links to this justice. So I'm just going to finish by talking a little bit about work we're doing right now, and this is a paper in review, so it's not published yet. But it focuses right in this middle, like right when you're in the middle of a transition or transformation. That's when you can have the most uncertainty. And we know that from historical cases, also from, for example, democratization processes, like in South Africa, for example. The apartheid regime let go of the system in 1990. Nelson Mandela was released. They had 4 years of writing the new constitution. And 1994, the constitution was in operation. But those 4 years, 1990 to 1994, more people died in violent conflict than any 4-year period during apartheid. And it just showed that this middle, it can be most explosive, because that's when movements that have been joined in trying to get the regime to go, to shake the system enough, to get the regime to say, okay, we open up. This is the Arab Spring also. That in that space that opens up, there might not be consensus of where to take the system. So actually be a competition. So also groups that have been joined in trying to shake the system actually starts to fight. And that's what happened in South Africa with the ANC. They split up in that moment. So that's also something we have to build capacities around. So how do we hold that middle? How do we stabilize enough so we don't get these sort of violent conflicts? How do we navigate peaceful transitions? So that's what this paper is about. So we use then different concepts to explore what capacities do we need in this exact moment. So we used our work on imagination and forward looking, but also our work on hope and how hope can be really important, but also hope can be crushed, which also have this transition pain dimension. We use the word, we use the concept of hospicing. Her name is Vanessa Andriotti also. Very good work on hospicing, the concept of hospicing. She also used the last name Machado de Oliveira, and she is at the University of Victoria in Canada. And it's about this. How do you let things die, but die with dignity? So here also getting back to this concept, we're using the word and the concept of dignity now to understand and help us think about the capacities, because dignity, I think, is really useful, especially when you're in a situation where you're far from each other. You might have been in conflict. You might have, demonized each other, etc. But you need to start to come together. And dignity is a way to do that, because I don't have to like you. I don't have to respect you. I don't have to trust you, but I can still treat you with human dignity, that you have human value. And that's, for example, how they have worked in places like Rwanda, Northern Ireland, etc. Focusing on that. And then we use also the concepts of liminality, which is this in between, when systems are in limbo and you have this high uncertainty and high risk of violence, etc. In combination then with, for example, Adam Kahane's work on radical collaboration. And he's done work on books, writing books, several books now. He has, I think, two new books coming out also. But he's focusing on situations where you have these sort of situations where you're very far from each other, but you can still work with transformative change, even though you can't come to a consensus. And I'm just showing this is some literature tips that you can look up yourself. But I think some people have addressed this sort of the in-between. How do we hold that space, hold the middle enough for us to navigate these sort of potential conflicts, etc.? So you have the work by Donna Haraway, staying with the problem. How do you stay in that uncomfortable place of conflict and friction and tension? And also this book, Sitting in the Fire. And also some people have looked at how can these civil assemblies, what are they called? Civics assemblies? Do they? I feel it's not quite right, but use that as a method maybe to hold that space. So there is some promising work on that. And we have worked on a concept called transformative justice, and as a way to hold that middle. And transformative justice is sort of a field that comes from transitional justice. It has a long history and a lot of work on this topic. And we're trying to bring it into this specific framework of understanding. And then we also look at the concept of tipping points, and I think that tipping points is and leverage points. Donella Meadows, for example, is very useful, but I think it's more about not just reaching a point and then everything will turn and we're going to roll into a better system. That we have to reach that point. I think there's a tipping dynamics. There's a phase of when things can tip, but it requires a lot of capacities to avoid these derailments, etc. So then I'm basically done. I hope I haven't. I'm okay. Shall I just, because I just want to mention some of the work that we're doing outside the academia, which I'm very passionate about, and that's working with arts and science. So that might just interest some of you. And these are some of the things we've done. We're working with Simon Stålenhag. I don't know if you know him. He's been writing a lot of sci-fi books and a lot of illustration for the gaming industry. We also work with the Way Out West, that you might know, the music festival in Gothenburg, where we have this Greentopia, where we gather every year. We gather the music industry in Sweden and the Nordic countries. And then we have focus on a lot of these topics that I talked about today. How can the music industry and the artists and the fans be part of transformative change? So this year, if you're interested, it's the 7th of the Greentopia is on the 7th of August. And coming up is also we are arranging a concert. We've been working over a little bit more than a year now with this Kronos, one of the world's most progressive and long-lived, I think, string quartets. that was going to do a collaboration with Andris Nair Magnason, an Icelandic writer. So we bring these forces together and then focus on issues like, you know, humanity. It's like what it means to be human, what it means to take responsibility for the future of our biosphere, and what it takes to find our common humanity. These are the things that I've been talking about. So I think that it's a art, music, etc. is a very, I think, powerful way to also to work with transition and change. Thank you.
Now our viewers have some questions. Unfortunately, we're kind of over time a little bit. Maybe Marlene, is it fine if we go a little bit over?
And I will stay. I can say I will stay, so I'm here for the break also.
Yeah.
If you don't have, if you have questions, you can come up.
Yeah. So we set up a Menti. So if, of course, you can raise your arm and ask a question, but you can also scan and we'll, if you're uncomfortable with saying it to everyone, and then we'll read it. But yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
So very interesting talk and important concepts. How do you measure? What are the best measurements according to you that we're actually in the transition? What would be the measures we should look at to see? Are we close to a tipping point for this, or like how to see where we are in these concepts?
Yeah. I think there's a very long answer to that.
Yes.
But I think it's a good question, so maybe we can leave it as a question. But I think that something we work with then is to try to take the planetary boundaries, for example, and make them applicable in that context. Can it help us give us these measurements that shows us that it's on the way? And then I think the whole, and then of course then it has to be the same for the social dimension, right? So it's hard to say what's the best measurement. It's probably a lot. But one thing that I like that there's new ways of do evaluation that's coming out. So how do we evaluate in context where you have high uncertainty, but also high agency? We can do a lot, but we don't always know where we're gonna end up. And the old way of evaluation is that you think you know what you're doing, and you say there are 3 steps we need to take, and then you do that, and then an evaluator comes in after 5 years maybe, and then it triggers some fear of failure because what's this person gonna find? But I think there's other ways now, the developmental evaluation and principle-based evaluation, that then helps you navigate those complex situations, and where the evaluation is continuous and it's with you the whole time. So it gives you real-time data, and then it's up to the project to figure out what do we need to measure. And that's the part of the process of figuring that out and use that in navigating. So that's detecting unexpected negative consequences, but also unexpected positive ones. So you might have to, you move away from the negative one, but you move towards the unexpected positive one that you weren't didn't have in mind. So I think that's promising. Those nice tools.
Okay, should we take just? Okay, I'll take just the first one. If you can take that one, So should there be more social psychologists work together with professional and scientists in global action planning of sustainable development?
Yes.
Go ahead. Sorry, confusing.
The socio-psychologists work together with professionals and scientists. Yeah, I think that in general, the psychological dimension is, of course, important. There's a lot of work going on already, but maybe this is about new ways of working together, maybe. And I'll say definitely, and it's very important. There's that there is a lot of work now also that's focusing on the inner transformation, and sometimes it becomes a part of the wellness industry, and also appropriation of indigenous ways of working with the inner. So it's not always positive, but I think it's a really important focus. I think, and how do we change ourselves, because I think it's a super important part of changing systems. So that there's a lot of tools out there that we can use, and because one of the problems I think is, you know, when you work with CEOs of big companies, they think of themselves as very actionable. I do action. I'm good at action. I see a problem, I do action. But the problem is, that's the problem, that there's too short space between the seeing the problem and the action. There's no reflection in between. So it's just more of the same action that actually created the problem. So what we're trying to do now is to help people take a break, you know, in the middle there, and reflect on, okay, I see this problem and I'm part of the problem. So how should I work with myself so I can act very differently and do action in a very different way than I usually do? I think that has the psychological dimension a lot.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, and we'll keep this question. We can come back to them.
Hello. Thank you for the invitation to talk here. I will talk about chemicals, why chemicals are a problem and why we don't manage to solve this problem, and also potentially also some solutions that we have. I work here at the Department of Environmental Science, and my research is on science policy interactions within the chemical regulation globally and in European Union. We've already heard that chemicals are part of the triple planetary crisis, and here is the planetary boundaries, and novel entities. Here is the chemicals. So as you can see, we are way above what is okay for the planet to handle. And if we look on where we stand now and where we are going, it's not going to be any better. This is the world sales of chemicals in 2020, and this is what we expect from 2030. A huge change, and I say that this does not include pharmaceuticals, which is also a group of chemicals. So it's that is close to 2 trillion euros more here. So that's a lot more. And we also see this change in production in countries where EU legislation is stronger and better enforced, towards countries where we have less protection of human health and the environment, which is also worrying. The chemical industry is a strong player here, and they call themselves the industry of industries, and that is for a good reason. No other industry can operate without the chemical industry. They provide chemicals to every other area. And this is also what makes them so powerful and also difficult to work with. And so just a quick update on why chemicals can be a problem. So not all chemicals are a problem, but those have certain properties that we don't want to have. One is that they are persistent. That means they do not break down. So if you let them out in the environment, they will break down very slowly or maybe not at all. We have, for example, a group of chemicals that are called forever chemicals because we cannot make them break down even in extreme environments in the laboratory. These chemicals also bioaccumulate. That means that they prefer to be in your body compared to in the water or in the environment, in the air. That means that they will find their place there and not leave. They also have potential for long-range transport. That means that we will find them where we don't produce them, where we don't use them, and where we don't have the waste. For example, in this polar bear, we find chemicals that we use in our everyday products. They're also very mobile in water, some of them, meaning that they transport in a good way long distances. They transport to our groundwater, they transport to our drinking water sources, and we now have this crisis. Even in Sweden, that's supposed to be so good at environmental issues, that we have, all of us have drinking water that is polluted with chemicals called PFAS. And the last thing then, that these substances have toxic properties. So when they are in our bodies, they can cause things like cancer, reproduction failure, and so on. And so that's the reason why we don't want them, at least some of them. So globally, we see a lot of problems, and this has already been mentioned, and also illustrating the nice connection between climate change and our use of fossil fuels and chemicals production. We had the example of solar panel resulting in use of rare minerals that are really toxic to our environment. We have production of food, which results in the use of pesticides that are highly toxic to our bees and other insects that are important for pollination and other ecosystem services that are important. And the third example was, what was that? Yeah, the waste. Here we export it to countries with less strict rules regarding environmental issues, and we see a lot of problems connected to that. Yeah. So chemicals is causing a problem on a global scale, and we are not near to solving this problem. We also talk a lot about the circular economy, and I just want to point out that when it comes to chemicals, this is really a big problem. We have this loop that we want to keep our goods and our material as long as possible in this route, and just rarely incinerate or add new material. That's the idea. But when we add hazardous chemicals, that means that we will have that in that loop forever. And currently we have hazardous chemicals in pretty much any product group that we are using today, in our clothes, in our mobile phones, in toys, in building materials. So we are all the time having these hazardous chemicals in our loops, making it close to impossible to transfer to this non-toxic circular economy. This is a quote from the former director of the US EPA, and it's concerned a group of chemicals called PFAS. What began as so-called miracle, groundbreaking technology meant for practicality and convenience quickly developed into one of the most pressing environmental and public health concerns of our modern world. This can be, there's so many groups of chemicals that can be attributed to this quote. And I think it's also true for example, plastics, because if you look at if you go into, oh, hi. If you go into YouTube and Google old advertisement movies from 50s on plastic, it's really funny to see how they advertise plastic and plastic materials like solutions, and how it's revolutionized the way we're living. And now this is like one of the biggest problems that we have in our world today, all the plastics. Which then contains a lot of chemicals. So what we need is really simple. We need to reduce the use of hazardous chemicals, but also to reduce the overall use of chemicals to lower the pressure on ecosystems that we have. But this has turned out to be quite difficult. And what we see is that voluntarily measures is not going to do it. We don't see that chemical industry are doing this voluntarily. They're not substituting the ones that are hazardous chemicals. The thing that is driving substitution tends to be EU regulation globally, but primarily in EU. But the circled thing bars are different EU regulations, and this is just a questionnaire asking about the drivers of substituting bad chemicals. And we can see that we need that chemical regulations to raise the lowest bar There will, of course, always be some companies that move ahead, but most companies will not move ahead until there is a requirement to do so. In regulation, we have this really simple process. We use science to do a risk assessment, and then we make a decision. It looks really simple, but in practice, it turned out to be very difficult to actually come to the decision that chemicals should be restricted and we should stop using them. And then this goes back to the power that this industry has on countries, on our economy, and which is very, very sad to see. What we see is that the burden of proof is on authorities to prove that a chemical causes harm, instead of having it on the chemical industry to prove that the substances that they have are safe. And this is kind of strange. Like, why do we have this kind of system? And then we also have an insufficient test requirements in the chemical regulation, meaning that we don't have enough information to make a decision. So the authorities that would like to say that something is problematic don't have the information that is needed. So only a fraction of the chemicals that we have in the market today are well understood and we know enough about. And if you, I don't know if you pick mushrooms, but I don't. I have a vision that I will be the kind of person that pick mushrooms. But if I would be in the forest, I would pick these mushrooms because those are the safe ones, the ones I recognize, the yellow ones. I would pick those. I would not pick these ones, and I would not pick these ones. With chemicals, we are using these ones, we are using these ones, and we are also using these ones. So we have this strategy that is just really makes no sense. It makes no sense. And we continue doing this year after year. There's also something called the cocktail effect. And I'm going to try to explain this as something that's maybe related to you tonight when you drink a Long Island iced tea. So a drink may contain like vodka, rum, and tequila and gin, all of this together. If you just drink one of them, you're not going to be that drunk. But if you drink all of them, you're going to be very drunk. And this is the same for chemicals. Like each, maybe we can handle one of them, or maybe two. But the amount we have now is unbearable for our planet to handle. So, but this is not how we approach it in our risk management. We approach it one by one. And then when you look at something in isolation, oh, I'm just going to drink the vodka, then it's going to be okay. And then you move on to next, say, oh, I'm not just going to drink the tequila, that's going to be okay. Then it doesn't give you the full picture of what you will actually drink in that evening. And the same goes for chemicals. You will not, we don't really even try to understand what we are actually exposing ourselves for and the planet. We have a built-in conflict, and the chemical industry is responsible for providing data and performing risk assessments on the substances where they have an economic interest in the outcome of the risk management. Do you think they are motivated to provide more information? Do you think they are motivated to make interpretations that are of the data? Because science is not clear, or rarely clear. Science can also always be interpreted in different ways. And what we see is that in the industry always are taking the side which is beneficial for their interest. And then we have a system like this in place. They're supposed to protect us and the planet from chemical problems. I'm going to give an example that is very concrete, and that refers to a group of chemicals called PFAS. Those are the forever chemicals that never leave our planet that we now have. The company is called DuPont. They are US based. They withheld this information. That they knew that these substances were problematic. They knew it for 40 years. They withheld this information from authorities. When this was came into light, they implemented panels with their own experts to evaluate the scientific evidence. Very convenient. They also changed the limit value, the values that were considered to be safe. When they realized they couldn't make that safe level, they altered it so that it would on paper look like everything was okay. They questioned a lot the independent experts in this field that said that this is a problem, attacking them in a not friendly way. They hired lawyers to prevent regulatory and legal actions, and they refuse even today to take responsibility for these emissions. A group of journalists, they investigated the cost connected to current polluted sites of PFAS in Europe, and it's 100 billion euros per year to clean up for the rest of our lives. We know this because there was one guy who accidentally had to start digging into this. This is Robert Byland. He was a corporate lawyer who just happened to be caught up in this situation, and because of his dedicated work, we now know that DuPont did this, and he got the Right Livelihood Award a couple of years ago. And it's also a Hollywood movie if you feel like that's more your style compared to reading scientific papers about this. Another thing that I also want to mention that science and policy don't always go so good together. I don't know what your favorite TV show is, but sometimes there are TV shows there are like two main characters that are both good. They aim for good things, but they don't seem to be collaborating good all the time. It's like there seems to be some kind of conflict and so on. That's the same with science and policy. We all both want to do the same thing. We want to protect human health and the environment, but we seem to struggle to collaborate, and this has been obvious in the field of chemical regulation. And I think one of the problems that we have is that in science we are obsessed with novelty. We just want to know every detail, and we have always the privilege of saying I need to do another study before I conclude and then before I act. But in policy, we don't. That's not an option. And here, there's a lot of standardization and also a pragmatic approach. You need to know enough to act before you act. And you also always have to act. Even if you don't act, that is an action. So therefore, there has been a lot of conflict in this sector between science or conflict, maybe not conflict, but there's been a difficulty in transferring the knowledge that we have in academia into risk management of chemicals. And then we need to be better at communicating so that our science is actually used to protect human health and the environment, not only to discover new things. One thing I think is we have failed with when it comes to chemicals is to talk about the root of this, and that is the way we live. We often talk about, like you mentioned, technical solutions, like we can solve this. We substitute this chemical with another chemical, and then we have solved the problem. But the root of the problem is that we are consuming more than we should. And every time we consume, this is connected to use of chemicals that are unsustainable. And I think, at least in my field, I don't think that we are discussing this a lot. We are discussing like short-term solutions that we have here on the table, but we don't just talk about the main problem here, is that the way we live is not sustainable. I always, when I speak to people, it's always so depressing. And I'm sorry for that. I tried here to end with something that's a little bit positive, some ways forward. So yeah, so we need to acknowledge the source of the problem and talk about that and how we can address it. We need to strengthen the role of science in decision making, and I think we can absolutely do that. Stockholm University just been granted observer status at the UN meetings, and that's a great opportunity for researchers at Stockholm University to to contribute to decision-making processes on a global scale. Well, so a lot of the problems with chemicals and plastics are discussed at these meetings, so it's very important that we are there. We need to increase the transparency so that we can understand, so we cannot have this problem with DuPont holding information at the same time as they have been doing, and also the problems that we have with chemicals. Like for now, we don't know which chemicals this product contains. So when we are to recycle it, we don't know how to do that. So we need more transparency also in the when it comes to consumer products, for example. We need to be better collaborating across sectors and disciplines, and I think this is a great opportunity because typically I talk to natural scientists within my field of field of chemicals. I don't talk to social scientists. I don't talk to environmental lawyers, or I don't talk to political scientists. But the problem cannot be solved by natural science only. It will never be solved by natural science. Sometimes we would like to think that. I will just as long as when we have the perfect study, we will solve this problem. There is no such thing. So we need to be better at having this collaboration across sectors and disciplines. And we can never. We need global agreements on this. So therefore, the global work that we do on chemicals is super important. So a global agreement to stop using the most hazardous chemicals is super important. For us, but primarily for the countries where environmental legislation is not in place and will not be in place for many, many years. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, hey. I totally agree that we need to think our consumption, but if I still need to buy something and I don't have a degree in chemistry, are there any tools that I can decide on? Would I choose this product or is this product better? Can you maybe give us some handy tips?
Yes. Okay. So as you mentioned, the best thing is not to buy it at all. It's also good for other reasons like climate. But if you buy things, buy some things that are labeled, eco-labeled, because then someone else has done that difficult job of trying to find the good things, and typically those labels exclude the most hazardous chemicals, so that's good. But I hate to give that advice to a group of students who I know that money isn't what you have in abundance. So and that's also of course a problem. But I mean, you can always buy secondhand and all that. I think it's a good option. Yeah, that would be my. But I think the most important thing is to not see yourself as a consumer primarily. You are a citizen of this planet. You have rights. You have you can vote. You can influence companies, politicians, decision makers, and all that. So I think that's the most important thing, because sometimes we just think of ourselves as consumers, and that's a very small part of who you are.
I have a follow-up to the like eco labels and stuff. That how to watch out for the greenwashing, because like many times that label, like when does it actually mean something? How do I know that?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like certain or something.
So then we're looking for the eco labels that had a third-party reviewer. Like, so it's not the company themselves that give themselves the label. It's an independent organization that provide the label. In Sweden we have Krav, we have Svanen and Bra Miljövalen, yeah, some of those. So third-party review. It's not so for example, Green Forest Alliance, I think that's the banana companies, their own way of branding their bananas. Might not be super bad, but it's yeah, I would be more suspicious towards those.
Maybe as a follow-up to those questions, what are the most problematic products that we use in our day-to-day life? What should we focus on cutting out?
We are primarily exposed through food and drinking water. So don't drink water, drink beer, drink alcohol. No, it's very difficult to control your drinking water. But other than that, it is the goods that we have around us. It's the clothes that we have, the mobile phones, the electronic equipment that we have, the building materials. It's in many ways difficult to control. But actually, there are studies that show that people, for example, anthroposopherna, what is that in English?
Yeah.
Okay, a group of people that have selected like a very alternative way of living, where they maybe not use any plastic. There's like they use their cosmetic products are very like natural based and so on. There is a study, for example, showing that they have much less of these chemicals in their blood, and they transfer less of it to their children. Because that's a big thing with, like, the first gift as a mother you give to your child is a boost of like a bag of chemicals. They give it every gift to our children. But for them it's less. So we can see that the behavioral changes results in effects on the exposure levels. But it's also difficult to live in this, like, to exclude yourself completely from a society that you want to change. It's also difficult.
Okay, last one. Is it feasible to force the burden of proof for chemical safety onto industry instead of the regulators?
That is what our research is aiming for. This is what we do in our work. We show that how this is a problem and how we can find solutions. And we are taking steps towards this. We did that on a European level. With the former commission we had from 2000 to 2004 was very progressive when it comes to chemicals regulation. And we did things that we haven't seen in 20 years happening. So that was very good. And now we have a new commission, and they have not yet shown what they will do, but there are signals that they will not continue this more progressive path. But absolutely, that's what we do work for every day. Taking steps, but it's not every evaluation shows that it's not fast enough.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
I don't know if, yeah, Annabelle's ready. Great. Okay. Also, if I'm worried about people standing up, so like maybe if you can try to move a little, I don't know. Yeah, because we have this huge room. Anyways, yeah. And so,
Yeah, great, perfect.
thank you.
Thank you. How are you guys doing? Yeah? Okay. I'm a postdoc in ACES, but I'm also part of the ECOP program, which is part of kind of complicated structure, but the UNESCO, and all in the scope of what's kind of going on right now is the UN Ocean Decade. So to be honest, I think I personally have to admit I've sort of been living in this sphere where I didn't even know these were happening. So since like the 1970s, the UN has declared decades with something that they want to specifically focus on. So for example, in the 1970s, there's one on racism, women, that kind of goes on. Various topics, you kind of also see that some are repeated for very good reasons, right? I don't think we're there yet. Human rights, ocean literacy, all of these really important issues. And what I think is really interesting also is that you kind of see a doubling of those from the 1970s to the 1990s. And then since the 2000s, there have been more than 10 decades per decade, basically. And since 2010, I don't want to speak for the earlier 2000s, but definitely since 2010, they have really focused on the Sustainable Development Goals. Who has heard of the Sustainable Development Goals? Cool, a couple of people, great. I'm not going to dive into those right now, but feel free to come talk to me about those. So I want to take some time now to focus on the UN Ocean Decade. So the full name of that, it's kind of lengthy, is the UN Decade of Ocean Science and Sustainable Development. So that started in 2021, and it's continuing all the way to 2030. The kind of vision and the motto for that is the science we need for the ocean we want. And so what the UN has kind of come up with are 10 challenges over these 10 years for the one ocean we have. I know we usually talk in basins, like there's the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, but essentially, if you look at it from an oceanography perspective, they're all interconnected, right? And so the UN declares these decades, but the body that are actually implementing that is the UNESCO. And so within the UNESCO, there's another body, which is the IOC, and the IOC in coordination also with a bunch of advisory boards, regional bodies, decade collaborative centers. So that's kind of more this top-down approach that they're doing. And then a lot of countries also have national decade committees. Sweden doesn't. Norway does, though, if we're looking at the Nordic countries. And so what this is there's usually one representative for each country, and they try to coordinate different actions or activities, events that are kind of linked to this UN Ocean Decade for the upcoming years, so until 2030. And also within that, it's a very, very complex structure, to be honest. The UN can also kind of implement actions, projects, and programs. So actions are like individual things. Projects are maybe on a time frame of a year, for example, or maybe a few years. And then programs are supposed to be these very large global programs that kind of help contribute to the decade. So one of the first programs that was actually implemented was this ECOP program. The ECOP program is an acronym for Early Career Ocean Professionals. So if you guys are doing any marine work, or if you guys like to snorkel, or if you guys like doing beach cleanups, or anything of that matter, you basically fall into that category. Yeah, I'm not going to go into the 10 challenges there too much, but it basically covers everything from ocean pollution to kind of expanding how we take measurements for the ocean, all that, and kind of putting that all together to achieve a clean ocean, productive ocean, safe ocean, all of these things that we probably need in the future. So yeah, if you guys have any sort of connection to the ocean, this definition is purposely framed as a very broad and general definition. So anyone with 10 years or less of professional experience, so that is across all sectors. Yeah, I forgot to mention fishers, so those are probably really important profession for the ocean as well. And the mission of the ECOP program is to provide a networking framework. We also organize trainings. We have professional development. There's a huge website with also funding opportunities if you guys want to have like a place where you could look at those. The yeah, just in general, really putting everyone's effort into one space. I wanted to show you guys this video of Laura, but unfortunately my PowerPoint didn't send, because what she says in this video is like, why are we doing this, right? Why are early career ocean professionals here, and why are we making noise? And it's because we're building a community. And I think especially in Sweden, right, with Fridays for Future and all these amazing movements that we've seen in the past couple of years, you guys have a voice, and you guys should voice your opinions and be loud and really force maybe more of the experienced people who now have all these connections that they might be worried about, or business transactions, or all these crazy things that will probably be in our futures as well. But I think it is our responsibility as young people to really annoy them and pinpoint and be like, no, what you're doing isn't sustainable. And we kind of do have to achieve climate sustainability in the next couple of years. And the ocean is a huge part of that. So to go into the organization a little bit, there are kind of 6 regional nodes. So those cover basically our continents. Africa, Asia are huge ones. Central America has also been around very, very long. There are 5 task teams focusing on different aspects, so ocean literacy all the way to the deep ocean. I think there's also one on like companies and stuff. If you guys are interested in like carbon removal startups, all of that. And then I think what is probably the most active version also are these national nodes. So it's kind of very similar to what the UNESCO is being or setting up, but for early career people. And so you kind of see a map. All the red ones are ones that have been established. All the yellow ones are ones that are in the process of being established or have an appointed person. And the green ones are in the process of being established that way. Again, Sweden is missing. So if you guys want to be involved, we're probably looking for people to represent Sweden in all of these kind of student-led or early career-led initiatives. And I kind of wanted to give an overview. So what all of everybody's work and all of these national nodes is contributing to. So there are several things on the YouTube website for the ECOP program. So there's regularly webinars and Zooms that are recorded and placed on there. There's also individual stories that are kind of recorded as these ECOP stories to try and inspire you guys to also participate. People in the ECOP network regularly attend events, so the COP meetings, UN Ocean Decade, conferences, all of those things. Yeah, I guess the webinars and conversations kind of tying together. We have a podcast, which I am heading. So if you, unfortunately, it's only in German because I didn't want to do it for everybody because I want to give you guys the space to also do that, you know? And also the purpose of the podcast isn't to kind of have everybody that is already in the bubble. It's really to try and reach out, because I think in order to achieve sustainability, and scientists, especially in Stockholm, have been talking about climate change since the 1970s. We really have to try and reach your grandmothers, your aunts, people, your neighbors, like all of these people who think the ocean is so far away from us, but the ocean actually produces every second breath of oxygen we take. So just kind of to give you that visual. If you say marine sciences, not so much my forte, or I see myself more as a soil scientist or somebody else, I mean, they're still kind of focused on that. I wanted to give you guys other options. Like, there are so many cool ways to get involved, especially in this age where I think we are all sort of lonely and maybe are trying to find ways to connect with people outside of social media. So the Sustainable Ocean Alliance is actually for young eco-preneurs, entrepreneurs, that it's like a foundation that was started in 2014. If you are more in the polar sciences, so this is kind of not just ocean, this is permafrost, everything that is related to polar Arctic, Antarctic, everybody. There's also the Association of Early Career Scientists. Yeah. And there is a Sweden hub for that. They're mostly based in Umeå, but I mean, you know, it's not that far from here. So if you want to talk to them. There is also this like European-based initiative, which is called Youth for Ocean. There's also the European Marine Board, which also has early career representatives. They're more focused on marine policy. And then another one I wanted to check in was the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. And there's also kind of a Nordic version of that. And I mean, there's also representatives from Sweden there. So if there's any one of those other initiatives, or maybe student council, you know, that resonates with you guys, check them out. And there we go. Some cool QR codes because, you know, Menti isn't enough. The left one is for the website in general. And then the one on the right is for the newsletter. And that one is actually so informative. Like there's job opportunities that are posted each month. There's, if you guys want to do like shipboard trainings, those are posted each month. There are other amazing opportunities that I can't even like put together now. So I'm co-leading the Germany hub because I don't have the energy to start a new one. So that's your task. And we have, so that's our email. We have a LinkedIn group where we also always post jobs, however, more for maybe German people or people who want to move back to Germany. There's a general ECOP Instagram, the one for, and the podcast stuff. If you guys speak German, unfortunately, it's only in German. So 1% at a time, right? That was it. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna, for sharing so many opportunities how to become active. Are there any questions about?
Yeah.
How did you find out about these opportunities?
Which ones?
When you started getting into this personally?
I don't know. Honestly, so prior to being in Stockholm, I had a different postdoc in France, and it was in a village, and I was very lonely. So I wanted to really somehow find a way to kind of connect with people and get active. And because guys, I know I package this as like really happy, fun, and friendly, but I'm pretty angry, you know? Like I just try to put it in positive energy. But I'm pretty angry the fact that, you know, we had the Paris Climate Agreement, we have all of these like right moving politics right now because people are like, oh no, climate change is too much work for us. Well, guys, if we would have started in the 80s when scientists were doing all these things, that puts us at the panel discussion later, where I think scientists are notoriously bad at communicating, but that's just because it's kind of like not our job, you know? Our job is research, and there's just not enough infrastructure in institutions to actually do the science communication. So yeah, they were starting this Germany hub, and I was in France, but I was like, you know what, that I want to do some change. And I think the fun and exciting thing about the Germany hub is that, so I'm Swiss, and we get to connect Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. It's not just like a one country thing, but it's really kind of regional in a sense, and really trying to find the common ground to connect these three countries that miraculously speak the same language. I mean, you could say the same thing about France and Switzerland, but I don't know how that's going there. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm happy to always connect you guys with anything if there's any specific questions you have. If, you know, I mean, the more you are in this, I think the more things you can connect. And I think starting is really difficult, but just Google, or you guys are all ChatGPTing it. But and there are ways to get involved, and I think it's, you know, you get a lot of more out of it maybe than you think of you putting into it. I mean, you guys can speak for that more as well, but it takes time and effort. But you know, you're meeting people, you're talking to people, you you're gonna have friends for probably the rest of your life that you can resonate or like pinpoint this back to, and yeah, get involved, just do something. We're already at 1.6 degrees Celsius. So. Any other questions? Yeah.
I kind of have a question because the UN decades that interested me.
Yeah.
I didn't hear about it earlier.
Yeah.
So
I can go back to those.
yeah, but I've like quick research and like with the increasing amount of decades per decade.
Yeah.
How do you feel about like our focus being split to so many things? Do you feel like there will be enough push in that one direction?
Well, I think it's kind of what you make of it. At least from what I'm gathering, the UN Ocean Decade, I think it's very broad, and that way it connects a lot of people. So, and I think the core theme is science in a way, because that everybody thinks of like science as a positive thing. So you kind of see that in this cryospheric decade, which is starting this year. There was also one, I believe it was on like, no, it wasn't malnutrition. It was some other decade that ended this year, and I didn't even find articles on Google about it. So I think, I don't know, maybe it's like also the fact that UNESCO has the IOC, which is the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, I think. I don't know. But I don't think efforts are being split. I think the fact that you now know, okay, there was a decade on ocean or on literacy, that's pretty important. What came out of that? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, I think there's not too much funding that goes into it from the get-go. That's a different story. So I think it's a lot of human effort. And then what you always talk about is like the legacy phase of it, right? And I mean, maybe there'll be another ocean decade, I don't know, in a few years, and then you can connect all of those things and maybe uphold the efforts that were being started now. But I mean, again, to this cryospheric science decade, there's a lot of interconnection there. And so I think once you I think it takes a lot of effort to establish this, but it kind of keeps rolling over time, I hope. So are we short on time? I don't know what the next presenter. Yeah.
Maybe one last question and we can.
I mean, if we don't have time, it's cool.
No, we can go over.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. I don't know if this is super on topic, but I am curious about your opinion. So like, you're talking about decade for the ocean, making the ocean better, cleaner.
Yeah.
And obviously this applies to the whole planet as well. The entirety of society, like as it is right now, sort of encourages consumerism and encourages making the planet dirtier.
Do you think so though?
Honestly, yes. Like with how much consumerism there is and how corporations are like, yeah, buy bottled water in a plastic bottle. That's like one-time use, like stuff like that, right? So I'm kind of curious what you think the strategy is for fixing that.
I mean, maybe that's my bubble thing, but I feel like at least in the science and in in my vicinity, people are very conscious about consumerism. I mean, I can only talk for Europe probably because that's where most of my people are. But I think we are sort of fostering a lot of connection between maybe countries in Asia that are more polluted and Europe, which I think is clean. And then of course there's always this argument, well, like, I don't know, people in somewhere dump all of their dirt in the river, right? But I mean, I'm sure there has to be some point of like where people I don't like calling it less developed countries because it's like just history. I'm sure they're gonna at some point be like, why is there trash everywhere? I mean, nobody honestly don't feel like anybody really wants to live in a pile of trash. Gets pretty disgusting.
Yeah.
So I do hope, I mean, I guess what you're referring to is like this article that maybe there was is that what you're referring to? That like clothing companies sold the most items ever this year? It's not just a recent news thing?
I mean, not specifically, I'm just referring to like in general, how like, you know, the average person is buying a lot of things that they don't use. Clothing is a big part of it, but it's also like phones, right? They're built to last 1 to 2 years, and then you're supposed to buy a new one. And the recycling doesn't really happen. They just kind of get sold to
Or burn.
somewhere else or burned, right? And it's like the incentives are aligned to make that happen. So I was curious if you had any specific thoughts.
Well, maybe it's like the glory of this Elon Musk shit that's going on right now is that everybody's like, oh, maybe we shouldn't give all our data and all of our money to 5 of the biggest corporations that are based in the US. You know, maybe we should be more conscious, and maybe we should think more than just like, oh, Apple announced a new iPhone, I must buy it.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense to me. Like, unless your phone is like has a spider up on it, you know, you don't need to get a new one. So I mean, you know, you can extend the UN Ocean Decade or any of the biodiversity ones, or you can always sort of get the angle of like reduce just what was said in the talk before, buy clothing from secondhand stores because there's less chemicals in those. Those are already washed out. Buy cotton. I don't know. I hope people are more conscious towards that. And maybe we should, you know, we have to be loud and make those companies aware that maybe even H&M's recycle thing is not actually as green as they are making it seem.
Yeah.
So that doesn't come without noise.
Yeah,
so.
For sure.
Yeah, let your voices be heard. Thank you guys.
Okay. So I think the plan is to go maybe a little bit over on the fika time, so we can have time for Peter to talk to us and also have some questions. But yeah. Okay.
Hi, I'm Petter Kallioinen. I work as experimental psychologist over at the linguistic department. I have a PhD in cognitive neuroscience. My typical work is putting electrodes on infants and small children's heads to study their language development. But I'm also a climate activist of the type who gets arrested and gets in trouble with the police. And I'm here to invite you to do the same. So this is the place where anger, frustration, sorrow, and all those emotions are welcomed. We in the climate justice movement, we think it is important to come in contact with those feelings. We don't want to cling to a false hope. We want to feel desperate and see what we can do from that. That might seem, yeah, I'm trying to set up my talk with this. Okay, so this will be a narrative review of what happened from 2018 to now in the climate activism in Sweden, from Greta Thunberg to now. And I was part of it most of this time, not all the time, but so I'm going to say who were the main actors, what was the response from media, politicians, or like policy, or what was the lack of response, and what happened with the juridical responses like repression. It's going to be a broad overview, and then I'm going to end with some analysis. Where are we now? What did we accomplish in these years? What did we miss? Where and what are the discussions going on in this movement right now? So from this, what I'm going to talk about is like a wave, a specific wave of activism. And that one started with Greta Thunberg and Extinction Rebellion in 2018. So I don't claim that these two forces were like the causal agents of all that happened. It was more like an avalanche, I guess. There was a lot of things in place, and then Greta was just in the right place in the right time and managed to start this or release this avalanche. And Extinction Rebellion was created in the UK, and the kind of immediate viral global response to these things. And I think Greta was bigger, the bigger force in this medially. That kind of kick-started a new wave of activism. So in 2019, there was mass mobilization, primarily through Greta's climate strikes. And there were mass mobilization in the number of millions. And in Stockholm, we had demonstrations that I participated in that had, at the peak one had 60,000 people in it. And it's not the largest demonstration in Sweden, but it's like close to how big demonstrations get in Sweden outside of this more traditional May demonstrations. So that was like the start of this wave, looking very promising. Then came the pandemic, and the pandemic was kind of antithetical to this mass movement that Greta and the school strikers had. So they went basically on pause. They started doing other things like working with this juridical cases, and but the Swedish part of Extinction Rebellion, they used like outdoors actions in groups under 50. Then you were allowed to meet in Sweden during the pandemic. So they had a blockade with 300 participants, but then they were in groups of 50 and were blockading roads in Stockholm. So that kind of things happened during the pandemic, and especially in the summer when the pandemic wasn't that contagious and spreading. So in August 2021, I came into this movement. It was a kind of action week in Oslo, just before the election in Oslo. So like 2 weeks, Norway being a petrol state, I thought that I was radicalized here. I thought that in some way, I thought that when we had this big demonstration, that there would be a response from politicians. I thought that Löfven, who was the prime minister at the time, would have like a big parliamentary debate. That's kind of how it should work, with a big mobilization and the politicians respond somehow. But there was nothing. There was hardly a comment from major heavy politicians to this, and I felt that, okay, so this is you don't care about this. We have to take more radical steps. I had been a tree hugger as a teenager in the 80s, so it was kind of close to me to think of civil disobedience as a method. In this campaign, we were about 300 activists in Oslo for 5 days, and it had an explosive reaction. It generated over 300 newspaper articles in Norway. It was considered afterwards being an oil election. It's it's kind of difficult to really prove that. I'm a scientist after all, but it seems reasonable to say that we had an enormous impact. And that was a very encouraging start for me. On a more personal level, it felt like I've been aware of the climate crisis since the 80s, since I was in the environmental movement then. So it was like just finally pushing something in at a different level in this direction, rather than doing my recycling. So when I sat in the cell in the police house in Norway, I felt really happy. I felt like finally I'm standing up instead of just, trying to get by. When the pandemic kind of went out in 2022, there was an election year in Sweden, and this was kind of the big push in this wave. We weren't as many as we were before the pandemic, like the large, like 10,000 plus numbers were gone. Fridays for Future had their demonstrations, but it could be like 2,000 or 5,000 people, which is significantly smaller. But this election year, Extinction Rebellion had 2 large weeks in Stockholm, and for such a small organization, that's like a huge push. Everybody were exhausted afterwards. And at the same time, a splinter group from us, still we're friendly, but they're a splinter group from us called Återställ våtmarker, that's restore wetlands. They took basically the same idea of doing disruptive actions, but they took it so much further because they started to block motorways. And there's a huge difference in what you see here is a blockade of a big street in the city of Stockholm. Then there are many routes to go around, and even if this is one of the biggest crossings, it doesn't have the effect that a motor highway blockade has. So Återställ våtmarker kind of raised the disruptiveness of the actions by 10 or 50, and they got enormous attention in media from this. The context this year was that all the parties, including the Green Party, they seemed that to have almost like a agreement not to talk about the climate crisis. And this was in complete opposite to 2018, where people, even the right-wing parties, were like, yeah, well, this seems like a good thing to address this issue. But in 2018, it was like dead. Instead, everybody except the Green Party wanted to subsidize fossil fuels, as that was one of the main things discussed in this spring, and that was a response to the prices going up with the war invasion of Ukraine. Still, with all this action going on, the press is very kind of stingy. They use police reports. They never interview us. So there's like small articles reporting that, by the way, there was a blocking in central Stockholm, blah, blah, blah. So, and so it was, in Norway, it was completely different. There were always interviews. What do you want? What is your purpose here? Letting the activists reach out somehow. And in Sweden, we think there was like a pressure from right-wing groups that made journalists very afraid to be seen as a megaphone for climate activists. However, the election goes really bad. The right-wing coalition, who joined by a populist anti-immigration party with Nazi roots, they win by a small margin, but they win. There are huge trials against Återställ våtmarker just after the election, and the Återställ våtmarker activists, they have been in jail for a month, so it's like 15 people in jail for a month, and then there's a huge trial. And at this time, there's kind of a press breakthrough. The press starts to kind of have the concept of the climate activist becomes interesting. There's an image of like gluing yourself to the motorway that becomes kind of the iconic or pop cultural way of looking at the climate activist in Sweden. And this press start to publish interviews rather than just police reports and things like that. I need to see my notes here. No notes. Something is wrong. Yeah. Anyway, what I'm looking for is nice one. I should probably turn it off, even if it's fun. How do you turn it off? Okay. So, in a way, what I described here is 2022, the spring and up to the election. That was like the huge push in this wave of activism. At the same time, maybe we were 300-400 who were at the center of things. So it's not huge numbers. It's more like willingness to do controversial things. With Återställ våtmarker, they asked me to be part of it. I was like, can't do it. I will die of nervousness sitting on the motorway. So this is not this is not your average activist. I have so much respect for them, and them being like regularly arrested for weeks. It's I've been in jail 2 times, but that has only been for hours. And once, when I was in a Swedish jail, I came into the cell and there stood Återställ våtmarker on the wall. I was like, yeah, they were here. Yeah, sorry for being a bit lighthearted around this, but you already know all the deal here. You know the moral conflicts, and so I can be a bit lighthearted in this. At the same time, so with this, like the press breakthrough, there is, it's like for a while you're at the center of attention from the press, and that was from fall 2002 up to early spring 2024. Then there was huge amounts of interviews. We did radio shows on the nicest programs on Swedish television, and there were opinion pieces and these personal things where one of our main activists, Björn, was at the front of a big paper in Sweden with this kind of personal. That was something completely new that had not happened before. And then kind of after this thing, it's like now we're climate activists. That's so 2022, I guess. So we're kind of back outside in the freezer again. So that was about the press. About the policy and juridical response. So what happened from that time is that all these groups continue to do actions. The Scientist Rebellion, which I'm part of, we sprayed a private jet air terminal, or two of our activists sprayed the jet air terminal, and we were all thrown in jail. And the Swedavia, who is a governmental body for flights, they said that they lied in the press and said that we had stopped an ambulance plane. It turned out that it was completely false. They have said they have admitted it was false. We were all suspected for airport sabotage. I was standing holding this banner. That's where I am. But I'm standing holding this banner, thrown in jail, airport sabotage. So this was kind of a complete overreach to what we did. So this kind of represents our attempts at kind of escalation, throwing paint. At the same time, we have other groups that are trying to go more broad, like Rebellmammorna, that they have had kind of emotional actions where they sit in city centers singing or having a song with a specific theme, and they have signs with kind of their children's names on. And being a mother is kind of maybe one of the most basic symbols of humanity. So they can have a really strong emotional outreach. What you see here is their largest gathering, where they had knitted red shawls as a red line for climate policy. You can't step over this red line. And they encircled the whole parliament with this in a beautiful ceremony with music and singing and dancers, and it was snowing a bit, and they were going with these red shawls. It was like it was really a beautiful manifestation. No press. So what the press wants is disruption, extreme novelty. It's important. It's impossible to keep up with them because they always want you to be like so much more than last time. All right, and the emissions increase with the new government. So if you compare where we are now to 2018, there's so many things that are different. The whole geopolitical and global political atmosphere is different, with wars, genocide, declining democracy, the backlash that you talked about. So here are just some graphs from Google Trends that kind of shows that if you look at Greta Thunberg, it's like all the interest is in the beginning, and then it wanes quite a lot. And if you take away the massive data from Greta, you can see underneath there the little red and blue. That's us. Extinction Rebellion and Återställ Monkey. But it's also kind of in the beginning, it's a huge interest, and then it declines. So this is my little bit of data here to just why I'm talking about this as a wave that has declined. However, if you look at climate change as a term with lots of smoothing, it actually goes up. So what I would say is that what we achieved in this way, we didn't achieve clear policy wins, but we did achieve globally, Greta, us, everyone involved, we achieved a massive raise in awareness, which this is a little bit of data to underline that. When I say that there was no policy wins, I don't know, maybe the progressive programs at EU level was actually influenced by the start of this wave around 2018-19. But now we see like part of it is a watering down of the resolutions, and then there's also a backlash. But what I want to say here is that the world is very different now. When this we have kind of had a alarm clock model of actions. That we want to disrupt things to make people aware that there is a crisis. We want to, that awareness was kind of the goal. That's kind of an alarm clock against status quo. But maybe with all the things happening in the world, you can't be more disruptive than Trump or Putin. Maybe it's maybe we need to rethink how our actions are directed. Maybe we need to think more of more of a power struggle rather than alarm clock model for actions. Maybe we need to organize boycotts, collect money, target specific industries, and in more of a power struggle way rather than just, hello, it's a climate crisis. How am I with time now?
Already the item time, maybe like next minute to come.
Okay. So I have some analysis, and that is we had enormous impact. We had kind of narrative power, mobilization power at some points, disruptive power, but we haven't had much institutional influence. And one problem might be that we have had this general alarm clock model. We have not had a program for mitigation that we are pushing for. I don't know. There are some social scientists who have suggested that is to be influential in Swedish politics, you need to have a program. That's one possibility. The media demand is like that there is a wave and a decline. You shouldn't be too worried about that. That's things you can't plan. Rather that there was a wave was good, rather than worrying about the decline. This is a bit hard to back up, but we think that there has been a very mild public backlash. It's only from the populist right wing that there is really a backlash. If you look at populations being positive to climate action, there's no backlash. So actually, most of those really disruptive actions were in Stockholm, and in Stockholm, the Green Party was the largest of all parties in the latest election that was for EU. So that's kind of it's hard to draw too much. That's not a clear measurement, but it seems like there is not a big backlash. So we can't back down, but we don't feel that we are close at all near winning. We're in a bit of a depressed situation now. There's the things that are discussed in any movement like this. Should we be more radical? Is it or is because of the time limit we can't be more revolutionary? Or is it already too late? Which is a lot of climate activists are thinking that we should move away from public life and just start having communities that can grow food under bad circumstances. I'm not part of that. Okay, so maybe there can be a response to Trumpism that can be kind of a new strong wave, but we don't know. It's a bit dark. Apocalyptic image. And some of the best press from this, most interesting press from this time. Oh, thank you.
Since we're a little bit over time, and I think everyone needs a break, we'll just make one quick question. But you will stay here for the rest of the evening, so you can ask your questions during Fika and also later in the panel discussion. So maybe I go with one of the questions that were here on the Menti. Let's take the first one. So we know that the right-wing parties are use online bot platforms to push their points. Do you think something like this could be used to push climate activism and science in general on social media?
It's a good point, because the right wing have certainly been good at this. I'm sure it's possible, but I would say that our strength is actually in reality. I think one of the reasons that the right wing have been able to use this is that nobody wants to be in a group of right wing people. Seriously, a bit. It's a joke formulation, but it's serious. They are nasty people. They need the net to organize, but we can meet for real and have something productive come of it. So I would say that our strength might be elsewhere, but I'm sure we can use. I'm sure we can be better at using social media. But I would say our strength, the best thing is go out from there, meet in the streets. That's strength.
Thank you again. So you can find in the room where we had lunch, the fika, there's an extra corner for gluten-free stuff for those of you who have a gluten intolerance. And also there is still some leftover lunch. So for those of you who haven't gotten the chance to have lunch, or for those of you who are extra hungry, grab another lunch. And there will also be a few poster presentations. Please be super nice to them and ask no questions. And if we ever repeat that, we will have more posters the next time. All right? All right.
That's the wisdom.